Hey guys, welcome to HipHughes History, where we get dizzy for the learning. How you doing, guys? We're gonna hit you up with some New York Times versus United States, 1971. What an epic court case, all about the freedom of press and prior restraint. What you talking about, Mr. Hughes, prior restraint? Well, I'm gonna explain. Hang on. All right, once upon a time. Seriously, this is really about the Vietnam War, government secrecy, and the right to a free press. So just a little bit of the backstory. One of the names that you might want to know is Robert McNamara, who's the Secretary of Defense. And in 1967, as Secretary of Defense, he ordered a secret study to be done at the Pentagon about the effects that the United States policy has had on the Vietnam War. So that study took a few years to do. It ends up being 2.5 million words or something. It's humongous. It weighs like more than a horse's head. And it's kept at the Pentagon. 1971, it's kind of done. And then another name that you're going to want to know is Daniel Ellsberg. Daniel Ellsberg worked at the Pentagon in the 1970s, early 1970s, and he had come across the Pentagon Papers and was quite disturbed about its content. Because really, there is a lot of information in the Pentagon Papers that casts a bad shadow on the actions of the United States government in Vietnam. Illegal bombings, secret bombings, the use of deadly chemicals, just a lot of negativity, a lot of bad stuff. So Daniel Ellsberg decides that he's going to be a whistleblower, that he's going to draw back the shades on the secrecy of these lies. So he makes a copy of the Pentagon Papers and he drops it off at the New York Times. So then in June 1971, the New York Times, now the receiver of the Pentagon Papers, begins to publish articles that are based on the Pentagon Papers. And then when Nixon reads the paper the next day, he's like, whoa, what's up with that? And now he's going to use his implied powers. There's nowhere in the Constitution that gives the president the power to stop the presses. But there are things in the Constitution that make him the commander-in-chief, and he's going to draw out of that the executive authority, like permission, to issue prior restraint. Prior restraint means that you get to stop the presses before the presses have run. And him and his Attorney General, John Mitchell, are going to use the Espionage Act, way back from World War I, to claim that this is a national security issue. That if the New York Times publishes these papers, they're putting the United States in some type of like grave and probable danger. So therefore, the United States government and executive privilege, authority, gives the president the ability to issue prior restraint on the New York Times. And the New York Times is like, what you talking about? What about the First Amendment? And that's what this really is. This is really about national government security and the right of a free press. So there's basically like a couple of things the court looks at. Number one, they look at the Espionage Act and they really start asking themselves the question, can you use this criminal statute, the Espionage Act, and then draw a line to prior restraint, which is a non-criminal kind of activity. It's a civil activity. And the court is going to rule no, that the Espionage Act, not only does it not apply, but the language in it is so broad that it can't be used to cherry pick these Pentagon Papers. There's language in the Espionage Act that talks about having any unauthorized access to any papers relating to national defense. That if there's a reason to believe that it might put the country in danger. These are very loose variables. And the court's going to say that we can't use the broadness of this criminal statute to apply it to the New York Times. At the end of the day, the First Amendment wins the day. The First Amendment, which is what the court says is the very reason it exists. I mean, what are you publishing? You're publishing a report that the United States government asked to put on itself. And now you just want to educate the public. The intent of publishing the Pentagon Papers is not to put the United States in danger, but to educate the public, to give them information they don't have so they can make a more informed decision about public policy as it relates to the United States in Vietnam. Vietnam! You get it, guys? The Pentagon Papers. At the end of the day, this is a decision that expands freedom of press, that is going to be a decision that restrains government power. So giddy up for that.
Following the New York Times ruling, the paper began publishing a series of articles based on the Pentagon Papers. The public, once aware of the massive misinformation concerning the war, began to oppose Vietnam at an even greater percentage. Many historians credit the publishing of the Pentagon Papers with the quickening of the war's end.
If you haven't checked out other HipHughes history lectures, I don't know what you're doing. You should be doing that right now. And just remember, kiddos, where attention goes, energy flows. We'll see you next time when we get all kinds of dizzy for the learning.